Hi, and thank you for joining our first VCU Health Vaccine Champion event. My name is Sharnice Smith, and I'm a member of VCU Health's marketing team. Before we formally begin our program, I would like to introduce you to Flor. Flor is a Spanish language interpreter who will share information about our language options today and how to listen to today's program in your choice of English or Spanish.
Buenas tardes a todos, todas, todes. Good afternoon, everyone. Mi nombre es Flor López y voy a ser su intérprete para el evento de esta tarde. My name is Flor López and I'm going to be your interpreter for the event of this afternoon. Los organizadores de este evento han considerado que les importa crear espacios accesibles en otros lenguajes. The organizers of this event have decided that they care to create spaces that are accessible in languages other than English. En esta ocasión vamos a crear este evento en un espacio bilingüe en español y en inglés. For today, we're going to go ahead and create the space of this event in a bilingual space in which one it will be accessible in English and Spanish. Entonces, lo que necesito es que tengamos un poquito el compromiso de todos para que esto pueda funcionar bien. I will need the commitment of everyone for this to work. Necesito que las personas que necesitan escuchar este evento en español vayan a un botón que va a aparecer abajo de su pantalla y van a seleccionar un globo y luego el botón de Language Interpretation y van a seleccionar el canal de español. I will need for folks that are primarily or only Spanish speakers to go and select the bottom that's like a globe, or it says language interpretation at the bottom of your screen, and then you click like Spanish language. También necesito la ayuda de las personas que van a estar haciendo la presentación. I will also need help of the people that will be doing the presentation. Necesito que a veces la gente empieza a hablar como que muy rápido y yo no puedo interpretar a la misma velocidad que la gente está hablando. Sometimes people start to talk really fast and I cannot go at the same speed that people are talking. Entonces, en ese caso, voy a poner un letrero y les voy a pedir que por favor hablen más despacio. In that case, I may put this sign and I'll ask people to please slow down. O también a lo mejor me ven haciendo esta señal con las manos, or you may see me doing this sign with my hands, that also means slow down. Quizás me vean que también esto significa que hablen más despacio. Si la persona que está hablando no se ha dado cuenta de la solicitud del intérprete, si por favor alguien más de ustedes me ha visto, pudieran intervenir y hacerle saber a la persona que está hablando que la intérprete necesita que hablen más despacio. If the person that's talking has not realized the request that I'm making, if any one of you has seen me, could you please intervene and let the person that's talking, the facilitator, know that the interpreter is asking them to please slow down. A veces la gente está hablando muy bajito y no los puedo escuchar. Sometimes people are talking really loud. I cannot hear them. So, si eso pasa, if that's the case, tengo este letrero, I have this sign, and I will ask people to speak up, y le puedo pedir a la gente que por favor hable más alto, o quizás me vean haciendo esta señal, or you may see me doing this sign. De la misma forma, si la persona que está hablando no se ha dado cuenta, si alguien más, por favor, le puede hacer saber. In the same way, if the person that's talking has not realized what I'm asking, if any one of you could also please intervene and let them know. Eso sería todo. Muchas gracias por su atención y vamos a comenzar. That will be all. Thank you very much for your attention. We'll go ahead and get started.
We're excited to hear from scholar Janine Guidry, who will discuss a few tools to help us provide vaccine confidence to those in our community that are hesitant. Once again, my name is Sharnice Smith, and I am a member of VCU Health's marketing team. And I'm happy to be here today to not only introduce our speaker, but to also just offer a sincere thank you for helping us build up our defenses against COVID-19. Your decision to become a vaccine champion will help us keep our community safe. So today we'll hear from Janine Guidry, who's the Director of Media and Health Lab at VCU Richard T. Robertson School of Media and Culture. Hi, Janine. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Sharnice. Thanks for having me.
So I'll now turn the show over to you.
All right. I am going to share my screen. Here we are. Okay, first of all, thank you all for being here. Thank you for watching this. And more than anything else, thank you for being a vaccine champion. The COVID vaccine has really been a tremendous success. Normally, to develop a vaccine from the beginning to a vaccine that's approved takes at least 5 years. The fact that within 1 year of the COVID-19 pandemic really starting, we had 2 vaccines approved under emergency use authorization is really nothing short of a miracle. And I'm so grateful for that. It was only possible because of a great investment by pharmaceutical companies, by academic institutions, by governments worldwide to be able to develop it this quickly. And it was developed completely safely. But a vaccine is only as good as the vaccinations that are taking place. Basically, a vaccine is only as good as the arms that a vaccine goes into. If a vaccine stays sitting on a shelf and doesn't get injected into our muscles, basically, then the vaccine doesn't help us in any way stop the pandemic. One of the things that we have seen over the past 6 to 8 months is we've done a lot of studies trying to figure out, are people willing to get this vaccine? And over the past 8 months, we've seen people express quite a bit of hesitancy, between 40 and 60% at different times of the past 8 months, of people who we asked and who other studies asked said, yeah, I'm not sure I'm going to get that vaccine. And in part, one of the reasons that people would give is, look, if it normally takes 5 years to develop, how can this be safe? Well, it's safe because no corners were cut. The vaccine was developed the exact same way that vaccines are developed throughout time. Where we actually were able to do it quickly is because people were willing to invest and start developing the vaccine and making it, not knowing if it was going to be a success. And in the cases of the vaccines approved right now, that has really paid off. But here's the problem. If we have between 40 and 60% of people who may have, to some extent, say, I'm not sure if I will get this vaccine, in order to really get through and conquer COVID-19, in order to reach what we call is herd immunity through vaccination, which means that the virus cannot spread anywhere near as fast anymore. It doesn't mean it completely goes away, but it means that we're no longer in the midst of an outbreak. We need to see between 80 and 85% of the population vaccinated. Now, if you look at those numbers, we may have between 40 and 60% of people that say, I may have an issue with this, and we have 80 to 85% that we need to see vaccinated. You can see why that would be a potential issue, right? We need people to actually get this vaccine. One thing to keep in mind is that for people to accept new things, this is called the diffusion of innovation theory. For people to accept new things, usually things go on a curve. There are early adopters. The majority of you here listening, you are the early adopters. We're very grateful for you. And there's people that then adopt it later, and that's usually a larger group. And then you have the late adopters. So the fact that not everyone right now is vaccinated is absolutely normal. The other thing, obviously, is right now we don't have vaccine available for everybody. We're still producing vaccine. But the fact that people may be slower to accept this vaccine is not necessarily an issue. What they need is they need to hear from us. They need to hear from you. Vaccine hesitancy means that you're not going to get a vaccine, or you're going to delay getting a vaccine when it is available to you. But there are several levels of that. And the way I'm approaching this here is to give you some tips on if you're communicating with friends, with family, with coworkers, with anyone you may encounter about this vaccine. is realizing there may be different types of people out there. Number one, you have people who are supportive of vaccines. They vaccinate, they give their kids all the vaccines, they get their flu vaccine, but they may have questions about this vaccine, particularly because it was developed so quickly. Group number two is people who really have questions about the safety of vaccines, a lot of times because of misinformation they have received. They have read somewhere, they have heard somewhere, and they have concerns that maybe vaccines aren't safe, including this vaccine. And then the final group is a group that says, I will not get vaccines, regardless. I don't think they're safe. I don't think they're good. I am not going to get them. That last group is hard to convince and to communicate with. But the first two groups, I think a lot of times people just don't have the information they need. I think something else to keep in mind is we don't live in a vacuum. We don't live in isolation. A lot of us are getting some of our information. We spend some of our time on social media platforms and online. And I think we need to be aware that, especially online, there is a lot of really great information about vaccines. Virginia Department of Health, VCU Health, CDC, but there's also a lot of places, especially on social media, that try to spread misinformation about vaccines. So what does this misinformation look like? This is not a complete list. I wish it were. There's a lot more misinformation, but I wanted to just give you some examples of some of the things you might encounter. First of all, this idea that the vaccine was developed too quickly, that because vaccines normally take longer to be developed, the fact that this was ready in less than a year must mean that it was developed too quickly. Like I said a few minutes ago, it wasn't. There were no corners cut in development. Where we were able to move faster is because we're in the midst of such a pandemic that the governments and the pharmaceutical companies worldwide were willing and able to develop these vaccines quicker and say, you know what, we're going to develop this. And if it doesn't get approved, then we have spent that money and we're not getting anything back for it. And so that really made the time to the development get shorter. But the way the vaccine got developed is absolutely safe and was done exactly like with the same testing, the same number of people tested as other vaccines. Another question, I'm afraid the vaccine will alter my DNA. It doesn't. It doesn't interact with your DNA. Where this comes from is that the two now available vaccines, Pfizer and Moderna, the way they work is they work with your mRNA. And if you're not a medical professional, a biologist, a virologist, then mRNA and DNA may sound pretty similar. And so you can see where people may be concerned, like, this is going to mess with my DNA, which is basically the foundation of who I am. This vaccine doesn't interact with your DNA in any way, shape, or form. Something else in misinformation that's going around. A nurse in Alabama, an older gentleman in another state, someone somewhere died hours after getting the vaccine. Up to this point, we really have no indication that this vaccine has caused people to die. Now, could someone die hours after getting a vaccine? Absolutely. But it doesn't mean that the vaccine is the cause of it. So when you see those kind of messages, always dig a little bit deeper. Another one is that the vaccine will have a microchip that is in the vaccine, and that the government will be tracking you through that microchip. Again, there is no microchip in this vaccine or others. Another one that's not on the screen is sometimes people are concerned that the vaccine may make you infertile. That is actually one of the things we've seen messaging about. We have no indication that there is any truth to that. This vaccine does not make you infertile. Vaccines don't work. That, I think, is the biggest fear of people. Well, what if it doesn't protect me against COVID-19? Actually, the vaccines that we can get right now, Pfizer and Moderna, are incredibly effective, between 90 and 95%. And that for a vaccine is very effective. This vaccine actually works. These vaccines do work. They protect you against, not just against COVID, but against the severe side effects of COVID. And then finally, this is a piece of misinformation that's not about the vaccine, it's about COVID. It's people who are saying that COVID-19 is a hoax or is just a flu. COVID-19 is much more serious than a flu. COVID-19 is not a hoax. The reason why this piece of misinformation is so serious is if you don't believe that COVID-19 is real or serious, you're not going to get a vaccine, even if you don't believe any of the other misinformation about the vaccine. So these are just some pieces of misinformation. If you see information online about the COVID-19 vaccine and you're not 100% sure if it's correct, go to the Virginia Department of Health, the CDC, or go to VCU Health. There's excellent information that is being kept up to date where you can check and see if information actually is true or if it's something that someone is spreading but it's not correct information. I wanted to share a little bit of some of the problematic spreading of misinformation on social media and realizing that even if you are not using social media, people who you may come in contact with and who may be concerned about the vaccine, there's a good chance that they will be using social media. These are images that we got from social media studying vaccines, HPV vaccine, the flu vaccine, vaccines in general. And there's all kinds of pieces of misinformation here that the vaccine, the HPV vaccine, is deadly, that it was developed to be deadly, that it's all a scam, that doctors are in the whole vaccination business to make money. These are all messages that are going around. Now, one of the things we have seen over the past year, especially, is that social media platforms have gotten very active in trying to curb the spread of misinformation. And in a lot of ways, there's some good action that has been taken. You see here examples of Pinterest, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Every social media platform is at least trying to make sure there's less misinformation available about vaccines online. I wish that that was the solution, because we know now that regardless, misinformation will try to prop up, because people tend to believe misinformation not because they want to do harm. They believe misinformation about, say, a COVID vaccine because they're truly concerned and they want to spread that concern. And so be aware that the people you talk to may get information that's incorrect from online platforms. So how did we end up here? First of all, the COVID pandemic is really the first social media pandemic. We had an outbreak of the H1N1 virus in about 12 years ago now. So that was 2008, 2009. And yes, Facebook was around, Twitter was around, but social media is now so much bigger, so many more platforms, so many more of us are online in some way, shape, or form talking to other people, that I think we can safely say that COVID-19 is the first true pandemic taking place in the social media era as we know it right now. In addition, the past year, all of us have spent a lot of time at home. And at home, for many of us, is where the good, or at least decent, internet lives and where we go online. And if you combine that with the need to find answers, realize that we've lived in an absolute environment of uncertainty, a high degree of fear, There's so many things. We didn't know a lot about this virus when it was discovered. It was a true new virus. Actually, we call it the novel coronavirus. That is the virus. COVID-19 is the disease that results when you're infected with the virus. We know a lot more about it now, but through this entire year, there's been a lot of uncertainty. When can we go see each other again? When can I hug grandma? When can my kids go back to school? When can my business reopen? How can I protect myself and my family against this virus? How serious is it? And now all the information about the vaccine. So you combine that a lot of us are spending time online. We may have a little bit more time to spend online, not by our own choice. We're searching for answers, and in the midst of that, it's in an environment that is just scary in a lot of ways. Another thing, how we ended up here in an environment that has a lot of misinformation, and between 40 to 60% of people, at least last year, who said, I won't get the vaccine. By the way, that percentage is really improving right now. People are seeing that people are getting the vaccine, that they may get a sore arm for a day. They may feel like they're having a headache or coming down with something for a few hours. But in general, these are mild effects. And I think as people see that more, they feel that the vaccine is safer. But still, how do we end up here in an environment where there still is too much misinformation? I think another thing is sharing everything we see. And that's a really human thing. We all do that. We're in the midst of a difficult situation. We find something that we think might be a solution, that might help, and we want to share it with our friends or family. And if we do that online, that message never goes away. You may have heard the word infodemic. Basically, it means that we're surrounded with so much information that it's hard for us to process. The information can be true, and the information can also be false. It doesn't really matter. If we're overloaded, we're not going to process any of it in a way that we should. And then finally, we as human beings have a tendency to accept the first thing we hear about something as truth. And that is particularly important in the area of social media. So how should you communicate? How should we all communicate? Well, I'm going to have a little bit of a health behavior theory lesson. This is Health Behavior Theory 101. This is a theory called the health belief model. And it basically says that it's been shown that if you want to convince someone to get the COVID-19 vaccine, and that's really what we want to do, right? As champions, we want to share the vaccine, it's safe, it's protecting us, and you should consider getting it too. In order to do that, there are 6 things that the person who is listening needs. Number 1, they need to be convinced that COVID is a serious disease. If I don't believe that COVID-19 is serious, that I possibly could die from it, I might not get the vaccine if I think it's just a flu. Secondly, I need to be convinced that I am susceptible, that I am vulnerable to getting COVID. I can be very convinced that COVID is serious, but if I'm 30 and I believe that only people over 80 get the disease, I still am not going to feel a threat personally for my life. Then the health action we want people to take is get the vaccine, right? Or actually get 2 doses of the vaccine. Well, we need to also know that we need to believe that the vaccine works, that the benefits of the vaccine mean that the vaccine is going to protect you against COVID and the most serious effects of COVID. And we need to have a low level of barriers for the vaccine. And that means a barrier can be anything from, I don't know where to get the vaccine. I'm afraid it's going to be expensive. By the way, it's not. We all know that now. It could be that you don't believe the vaccine works. It can be you believe any of these pieces of misinformation. The vaccine doesn't work. I'm afraid the vaccine is going to do harm. All those things are barriers, and those barriers have to be low. And if there are barriers, we need to try to address them. And then the final 2 things that someone will need to accept and to say, yes, I'm going to get the vaccine is two things. A thing called self-efficacy. And what that means is, how certain am I that I can go get the vaccine, that it's within my power, that I have transportation to do so, get to the location, that I can actually get the vaccine? Right now, our self-efficacy to get the vaccine for a lot of people is maybe a bit low because we don't have enough vaccines yet to vaccinate everybody. But as we produce more vaccines, that's going to improve really quickly. And then finally, something that really helps is something that you hopefully will do as a champion. It's a cue to action. If you want people to get a vaccine, to make that decision, it helps if someone tells them, if someone gets a call to action. That can be a message that you post on Facebook. It can be a message that their primary care provider gives them. It can be you as a friend sitting down with someone and saying, hey, I got the vaccine. Have you signed up yet? That is what we call a cue to action. It reminds people, oh yeah, I need to think about that. If those 6 things are in place, people are much more likely to say, yes, I will get the COVID-19 vaccine. So keep that in mind. Now, for some people, they may be convinced it's a threat. They just may not think that the vaccine works. Okay, then you talk about the benefits of the vaccine. You make sure the barriers are addressed as well as possible. There may be people who say, I believe the vaccine works, and I believe it's safe, but it's just a flu. Then you should explain to people the severity of COVID. The fact that we've now lost more than 500,000 people here in the United States alone to this pandemic. All right, that is enough theory for today. On the right-hand side of the screen, you see how the model works with the pretty colors and the boxes. So what are some best practices when you talk to people? Here's some things that are, the first 2 are really important and they're really hard to put together. Remember I just said that as human beings, we're most likely to believe the first thing we hear? Well, that's what we call the primacy principle. We need to be first. The first source often becomes the preferred source. So if you're the first person who talks to someone who actually has gotten the vaccine, that may actually play a really important role. The second thing is we need to be right, because accuracy establishes credibility. The problem is, especially in the media, that being first and being right are 2 things that can be a little bit at odds with each other, right? Because if we're trying to communicate so fast, and I'm talking about media right now, and also about social media, and in that way, we're all kind of publishers. This is one of the reasons I said, just wait a few seconds before you share things. You know how one of the things that we've been asked to do to protect ourselves against COVID, especially before the vaccine, but also still now that we have a vaccine, washing your hands for 20 seconds. Soap and water preferably. If you have to, you can use a hand sanitizer with 60% alcohol or more. 20 seconds is a long time, by the way. When I first timed myself washing my hands, I washed my hands for 7 seconds, and I thought that I was done. So basically, if you sing happy birthday twice, you come close to those 20 seconds. All right, so if we should wash our hands for 20 seconds, one of the things I try to tell people is wait 20 seconds or wait a few minutes before you share information if you're not 100% sure it's right. So those things, be first, be right, are really important. Be credible. Don't compromise honesty and truthfulness. Be credible. Talk to each other. And one of the things that you have as a friend, if you talk to another friend as a champion about getting the vaccine, is you have a really good chance of being credible. You have a hopefully long-standing relationship with some of the people you're going to be talking to. Another thing is expressing empathy, addressing what people are feeling. Again, we have been in the midst of a pandemic that I don't think many of us could have foreseen how serious this was going to be. how much it would affect every part of their lives. So if people are concerned about that, if they're scared, if they are nervous, if they're nervous about this vaccine because they think, well, maybe it just was developed too fast. I heard something about this. Express empathy. Say, you know what? I can understand. I understand that you're concerned about this. But let me tell you my experience. Let me tell you some of the information that I actually know. The last two, promote action. Give people meaningful things to do. And I think getting the vaccine is one of the most meaningful things we can do. For most of this past year, beyond wearing masks, social distancing, and washing our hands, we have not been able to do much except wait. Wait for a vaccine to be developed. Wait for the disease to become more known. Wait to get more information. Now we have an action we can take that we know is safe and that is actually going to protect us, but not just us. If enough people get vaccinated, we're also protecting those around us. We're protecting people, and there are some people who cannot be vaccinated or can't be vaccinated yet. Right now, we're not giving the vaccine to children, and especially not to young children. So, in the meantime, until we study that, we are going to protect our kids by vaccinating ourselves. And that's probably the most meaningful thing we can do. I think in the atmosphere of powerlessness that I think all of us have felt at some time, this is one of the things to give us hope. And then finally, a really important best practice for health communication: show respect. This goes with expressing empathy. When people feel vulnerable, and again, I think we all do at this point, and if they say, I don't know, I'm scared, I'm nervous about getting this, express empathy, but also show respect for people. Don't make fun of people. I know you wouldn't do that because you're all awesome. But in all seriousness, showing respect, making the other person feel heard, can go a long way in establishing communication and establishing a relationship in which it's much easier for you to be credible and in which it's much easier for you to promote action. So these are just some things to keep in mind as you're communicating, whether it's online, whether it's in person, whether it is in person socially distanced with wearing a mask, because we still have to do that until we reach herd immunity. And then here are just to help us understand some of the obstacles to communication about COVID and about the vaccine. Number one, denial. Number two, fear and anxiety. Number three, confusion. Confusion goes back to, remember we talked about the infodemic, the fact that there's so much information available. There's no way for us to process all of it. So what's really truth? But the most powerful obstacle that we can find is this idea of hopelessness. And again, we have seen this over and over the past year. There's nothing I can do. There's nothing I can do. This feeling of hopelessness and helplessness. But now that we have the vaccine, I think if the vaccine represents one thing, it is hope. It is hope for us that there will be an end to this pandemic. The COVID-19, the virus that causes COVID-19, may stay with us. We may see cases every once in a while pop up, but we have hope to get out of this pandemic so that we can go back to celebrating graduations in person, to celebrating holidays in person, to hopefully celebrating Christmas together next year, New Year's Eve, Hanukkah. And I think that is a great sign of hope. And again, remember the vaccine that you get is really, really effective. It actually works incredibly well. All right, a final few things. How you communicate with people changes by their demographics. Communicate differently with someone who is elderly versus someone who is a parent of young children. You need to communicate probably differently with people related to race and ethnicity. One of the great things of concern that we're seeing is that people of color, and particularly um, Black and Hispanic persons, are more likely to get COVID. They're more likely to get serious effects of COVID, and they are less likely to want to get the vaccine and to actually get the vaccine. There's all kinds of reasons for that. Some of it has to do with the trust in the medical profession, the trust in research, and there are some really good reasons for that that are true and really heartbreaking, and they go back a long time. If you find that someone really has concerns about trusting this vaccine because of things that have happened in the past, um, say, for example, your African American friends, one of the most important things to communicate is that A, these concerns are valid, would be that this vaccine really is the way for us to get through this pandemic. If we do not have the vaccine, we are going to be wearing masks and social distancing and living our lives much apart for a much, much longer time. Something else practical, so be aware of who you're talking to is really the demographic thing. Be aware of who you're talking to. Be aware of what their concerns may be. And if you don't know, be open for them to tell you. If you are communicating in writing or on social media, using visuals is a really good thing. Because we respond as human beings differently to messages that include visuals. We remember visuals longer, we remember the messages longer, we're more likely to respond to them. So the Virginia Department of Health has great messaging out that includes visuals about COVID and about the COVID vaccine. So does VCU Health. So share messages from trusted sources or from the CDC. One other thing is using stories, and this is why this stories and trusted messengers is why we are so excited about you as champions for the COVID-19 vaccine. And that is this. People are most open to hearing a story from someone else. One of the hard things about telling a story about a vaccine is if a vaccine works, something is not going to happen. The COVID vaccine works, you're going to be protected against COVID and its worst effects. So the story is, I think, I'm getting the vaccine. I am excited to get the vaccine. This is what's going to keep me, my family, and my community safe. And this is how we're going to get back to being able to hug each other again. I'm doing this for my grandma. I'm doing this for my children. I'm doing this for us being able to go out and celebrate in community and in fellowship. Those stories are incredibly powerful. And only you can tell your story. At least only you can tell it most effectively. Let's put it that way. The second thing is using trusted messengers. The most reliable and trustworthy information on a public health level is going to come from the CDC, Virginia Department of Health here in Virginia, and VCU Health. So you've heard me say it about 5 times now. Because these truly are the best sources. Because if they need to adjust a recommendation, they will do so. We've seen them do that. But there are people who don't trust the CDC and who may not feel as comfortable with a government entity communicating for whatever reason. So in that case, what's really important is having a trusted messenger to communicate with them. And here's the good news. If it's someone you know and you talk to, there is a good chance you are a trusted messenger for your friends and your family. Another thing to keep in mind is answer the questions asked. If someone that you're talking to says, I'm not sure I'm going to get the vaccine, ask them why. What is it they're concerned about? Try to answer that question, not all the questions in the world. And I am probably the biggest offender in this way because I'm a public health professional and I love providing all the answers and all these solutions, not the questions that people are asking. So answer the questions people are asking. Again, acknowledge fear and uncertainty, acknowledge that that's normal, that we're all have been living through that, and that this is not an abnormal thing for people to feel. And realize that the science of this is continually changing and the environment of the vaccine is changing. Right now, we are having vaccines available, but not quite as much to vaccinate everybody. That is hopefully increasing and changing quickly as the weeks go by. So keep that in mind too. If someone is not eligible, I cannot get the vaccine yet. I am in group 1C and we're not vaccinating group 1C yet. But I signed up, I registered. And so if you're speaking with someone and they are not eligible yet, encourage them to register. Say, well, make sure you're in line. Make sure that you're signed up. Make sure that as soon as you can get the vaccine, that you know where to get it, how to get it, where to go. And again, with all this, I want to again thank you for being an ambassador, for being a champion for this public health miracle. We're going to get out of this. We're going to get through COVID-19. We've lived through a really challenging year. We see light at the end of the tunnel right now. And you, if you're a vaccine champion, you're going to help us get through to the end of this pandemic.
Thank you, Janine. That was a really informative presentation, and I'm excited to get to a couple of questions. We are going to read a few that were submitted in advance, but if you do have any questions, please feel free to put that in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. So the first question, as we encourage people to get vaccinated, how can we share if they are eligible or not? Where can we send them?
That's a really great question. Send them to the Virginia Department of Health website. So I'm assuming the person that you are talking to is in Virginia.
Mhm.
If they are, send them to the Virginia Department of Health website. There is a really helpful tool that they just instituted where you can find out who you are, what group you might be falling into, and you can also at the same time sign up to get more information there. So vdh.virginia.gov, and I think it is scrolling on the bottom of the screen, is you can both get the information on how people can find out if they're eligible yet, and they can also sign up to make sure that they're on the list, that we know they want to get the vaccine and they want to get the information.
Yeah, that's good to know. And I know also that they launched the vaccinate.virginia.gov. I figured this would be a good opportunity to kind of talk through why we should send people to that link too.
I think that information is when you're talking to someone, it's a momentary thing. Right? You have a conversation, you may be chatting online, you may be texting. Sending someone to a website like that is what is going to provide them with information that is easy to digest, that may answer in a quick way some of the questions that they have. And here's the other thing. People may ask you a question that you don't necessarily know the answer to. Well, there's a good chance that that website will have an answer and will have the best thing that we know right now. So I think it's both a resource for vaccine champions. It's also a place to send people. And again, I can't emphasize enough how important it is to send people to these reliable sources. So much of this information that's misinformation happens online. Let's use the information that is actually reliable and that is a lot of times also on this website. The information gets updated really regularly. And so if you think something may have changed, go to that website first and see what the latest information is.
And the next question, vaccine concerns around infertility are being wildly shared. Do you have an approach to how to communicate that this is false?
This is a really, really good question. So we can reach immunity, herd immunity, community immunity, two different ways. We can reach it by letting the virus do its thing and spread through society and get as many people exposed so that people become immune. And that's what some people are saying is, why don't we do that? That's better than a vaccine, than immune to a vaccine. Here's the problem. Even if the virus only has a mortality rate, so the number of people who will die of the virus, of 1%, if we rely on natural immunity and we let the virus go throughout the entire population of the United States, we're going to deal with more than 1 million people dying. Because we have 335 million people, I believe, that live in this country. So that is one of the biggest concerns, is that by letting the virus do its thing and by reaching this natural immunity, we're actually going to lose a lot more people. And that is one of the biggest concerns. What the vaccine does is it lets us reach this immunity and keep the majority of people safe.
Thank you. And we'll now go on to our next question.
Okay.
How do I address someone who questions whether natural immunity is better than vaccination?
I think we just answered that question, right? So that's the idea of that if we rely on natural immunity, if we rely on the virus spreading through our entire society, that a lot of us may absolutely be safe, but we're going to lose so many people. And we've lost more than 500,000 people now in the United States alone. That's not counting everybody else in the world. And we are all connected. And that, I don't know if anyone saw the memorial service. There have been some memorials nationally, and you see candles that represent people and lives and multiples of lives lost. I think earlier on in the pandemic, I didn't really know a lot of people whose families had been affected by death through COVID. And now I know at least 15 to 20 of families who've lost a loved one through COVID. That's the reason why natural immunity in this case with COVID-19 is absolutely not better than vaccination. Vaccination is safer, it's better, it's more effective. It's a way to keep people safe and to protect them, and at the same time to reach immunity.
Thank you. And the next question, there are concerns that the vaccine causes autism. How can we address hesitant parents who believe this?
Unfortunately, this is a piece of misinformation that has been going around for a while. And the first answer to this is it doesn't. We have now studied, and by we I mean the larger medical community. I am not a medical doctor, I'm a public health scientist. But as a research community, we have literally studied hundreds of thousands of children who have been vaccinated. There is no connection between vaccines and autism. What happened is that a doctor did a study in a bad way with very few children, and it was a fraudulent study. That study got retracted. The doctor lost his license. He is no longer a physician. And that small piece of misinformation has been spreading. And this is, I think, I'm a big proponent of social media. I love what we can do to reach out. And especially in today's environment of not being able to connect in person, it's a great way to connect with others. But misinformation can spread quickly there. And I think this piece of misinformation has been, we've seen this a lot online. The biggest answer to this is it really doesn't. Vaccines categorically do not cause autism. And we, explain, if you address hesitant parents, say, I understand that you perhaps have seen information that has been talking about this. This is incorrect information. There's a lot more that's available, so you can go into more detail with that. But I think the biggest thing is that we've tested this with literally hundreds of thousands of children. We've looked at this and seen if there is any possible connection to where we might even need to be concerned about this. There is no connection.
And I believe we have a question from the chat. How do you respond to the question, what are the long-term effects of the vaccine?
Another really good question. So the disease, the virus, we have only known about this for about 13 months as we're recording this, 14 maybe. And the vaccine has been tested, has been available for us with emergency use authorization since, I believe, the end of November of last year. So first of all, before the vaccine was approved, it literally was tested on tens of thousands of people of all racial ethnicity backgrounds, all adult ages. It was not specifically tested on pregnant women, but it was tested on women who were pregnant during the tests, if that makes sense.
Right.
What we know is that if there is a negative effect of a vaccine, in the vast majority of all cases, it happens right after you get a vaccine. And for the COVID vaccine, there's a pretty decent likelihood that your arm's going to be sore, kind of like when you get a flu shot, that your arm maybe have a red spot, you may feel like someone punched you in the arm. Some people may feel like they have a headache that's a little bit annoying for a few hours. You may feel, in the worst case scenario, that you come down with something. Again, these are side effects we kind of recognize a lot of times if you get the flu shot, but those are all very mild side effects. What you need to compare it to is, what does COVID do? And while a lot of people who get COVID may survive, even if you survive, you may end up with pretty serious side effects, with consequences that we really are now starting to see, that people recover from COVID and still have the consequences of COVID with them 6 months after they have the disease. So yes, there are some mild side effects that people can get through this vaccine. And really what that does too is it tells you the vaccine's working. What the vaccine does, it trains your immune system. It tells you, hey, if you encounter this, do this. So if you notice something, that's not a bad sign. Having said that, yeah, this vaccine has not been around for 10 years. So I think we are honest about that. But we also then need to know that in almost all cases, if there really is if there is an effect to a vaccine that in any case may be concerning, it's something that shows up not after years. It shows up fairly soon after the vaccine.
Thank you. And we have another question. Do you need a MyChart account to receive a vaccination, or how do you set one up?
I'm going to have to profess my ignorance here because I don't know what a MyChart account is.
I think this might be a good opportunity to plug in that vaccinate.virginia.gov site. And if you send anyone who's asking to that site, they will be able to pre-register for vaccination, and then they'll receive all the information that they need in order to receive the vaccine in their county or where they're located.
And I know that I registered and I didn't have to set anything else up. So for what it's worth, I just had to put in my information, my contact information. But yeah, that's unfortunately, I am not 100% sure. I could check into it though.
Thank you. And the next question we have. It's coming through. 1 second, please.
And by the way, Charnice, these are the most common questions. I mean, these really are the questions that we see coming up. That's a good question. Charnice, do you want to ask it? As people see it on the screen, but I got a preview.
Do we know how long the vaccine lasts? And will this be a yearly vaccine we need to get? I think that's a good question that I think a lot of even hesitant and those who want to get the vaccine will ask.
That's again, it's everyone, you're asking really good questions. These are the questions that people are likely to ask you. And unfortunately, to this question, we don't know for sure. The best indication that we have is that Moderna, one of the companies of the vaccine that's approved right now, has said that they think their immunity from the vaccine will last for about a year. So that would indicate there may be a likelihood that we need to get a booster. I also know that they're looking at, is it possible for those who want to bundle the flu vaccine and the COVID vaccine, like a booster for the COVID vaccine with the annual flu vaccine. But I think there is a decent likelihood that that we may need to get a booster at some point. However, again, we really won't know that until we're a little bit further down. We haven't really started this whole vaccination until it's not even been 2 months really here in Virginia, I believe. And so I think it's going to take us a little bit of time, but I do know there's a lot of incredibly smart researchers who are working on this and tracking this and making sure. And again, these websites, like the Virginia Department of Health website, will tell you that. And I think this is one of the other reasons why we want to make sure we know who gets the vaccine so that we're able to communicate with people, hey, you got a COVID vaccine. If we do realize that there is a need for a booster, we'll be able to let you know that you do.
Thank you. And I believe we have another question. Are you seeing rates of vaccine hesitancy change?
For the COVID vaccine, yes. It really looks like the vaccine hesitancy towards the COVID vaccine is getting, those rates are lowering right now. And I think it makes sense, right? A lot of the studies about vaccine hesitancy, about COVID, were done last year before the vaccine became available. And there was a lot of misinformation that was circulating, and there wasn't really a lot that we could offer because we weren't sure, was it going to be 2 doses? Well, it looks like for most vaccines it will be, for some it might not. So there were things that we didn't know yet, but now that the vaccine has become available, people are getting it. People are seeing their friends and family get it. They see people on TV get the vaccine and go, I am so grateful for this. And I think that the more people who get the vaccine and who say, I'm getting it, I'm so glad I got it. Yeah, I had a sore arm for a few days, or I had no side effects. I think people are, those rates of vaccine hesitancy about the COVID vaccine are going to get less. I don't think it's going to disappear, unfortunately, not anytime soon. And that's why I think us communicating is so important.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Well, I really enjoyed this talk, and I think we had some really great questions. And Janine, your presentation was just beyond amazing and so helpful. So I just want to thank everyone for being a vaccine champion, and your dedication to the health and safety of our community matters. And you becoming a vaccine champion will assist in building vaccine acceptance in coworkers, friends, family, neighbors, and more who are hesitant. So please continue to share information on the efficacy, the safety, and the importance of getting the vaccine. If you know anyone in the community that could help us build our defenses by encouraging others to get vaccinated, please send them to vcuhealth.org/vaccine champion. And if you have any questions or ideas of how we can help those who are hesitant in the community, please email vaccinechampion@vcuhealth.org. And once again, Janine, thank you so much for speaking with us today and sharing these really great tools so that we can be a champion of the vaccine in our community.
Thanks so much. And also from me, thanks to all the champions out there. You make more of a difference than you may know.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.